What's up, everyone? Good morning and welcome to Shaw Locals Bears Insiders podcast. I am Kyle Nabors along with Hub Arkush and Sean Hammond. It is Tuesday morning, May 16th, and thank you everyone who is joining us live this morning. And guys, Hub, I'll start with you. You're a fellow dog lover. I went to take the dog for a walk this morning. Sorry, I'm going into this, so I look out the window here. Went to take the dog for a walk this morning. Thought I'd get a nice walk in on a beautiful morning. You ever have it where like your dog goes out, you might get about half a block, they do what they need to, and then they just refuse to go any further with you?
Oh, sure, all the time. My dogs try and manage the run whenever they can. As a matter of fact, that just happened. One of the reasons I got a little late on getting ready, but very common. The dogs are in charge, buddy. That's the way it works.
Like we my wife and I we planted our garden, which is over by this park, a couple blocks from the house. I wanted to go over check stuff, and he literally like he just sat down and it was like, I'm not going a step further, we're going right back home, dude.
Yeah, what I get is my dogs know all the dogs in the neighborhood, and they want to stop and visit with everybody. They also think that every of the neighbors that we see want to say hi to them. So my dogs usually turn a 20-minute walk into an hour walk, and that's kind of what happened this morning, as a matter of
I
fact.
was just gonna say, I part of the reason I thought of it was because I know there's been a couple times where we get ready to go live and you're running a couple minutes late, and it's because you're out walking the dogs and having I had a feeling, yeah, that you were stopping to talk to some neighbors, or the dogs were at least.
Yeah, the dogs are the ones that stop to visit. I'm usually trying to get home, but that's the way it goes. They're in charge. What can I do?
Uh, we are here in mid-May. The Bears are getting set here in the near term or the near future to start OTAs up at Hallis Hall, and that's kind of what we're gonna talk about today as we're starting to get the roster set here. I wanted to dive into starting the podcast today, guys. Was Ryan Poles was on 670 The Score with Dan Bernstein and Lawrence Holmes on Friday. I linked that down in the description to anyone who hasn't had a chance to hear it. Sean, I thought it was really interesting to hear Ryan Poles in most of the time where we hear him talk publicly, it's in a group setting. It's always good when you get a GM like that in a kind of a smaller setting. It felt a lot more natural with him.
Yeah, you know what? Ryan Poles is a good interview too. I mean, yes, in those formal settings when there's 25, 30 of us in the room pestering him with questions, it can be a little, those are always probably uncomfortable situations for those guys up at the podium. But Ryan Poles is a good talker, and you know what? I thought those guys did a good job of asking him some important questions, and also just bringing out the person in him, which maybe we haven't necessarily seen from past GMs. I'm looking at you, Ryan Pace, a little bit here.
Yeah, Hub. Ryan Poles, it's his first time as a GM. He's a young guy, really seems to be settling into this role. And I was impressed during that interview when he talked about his draft board, Hub, of how convicted he really did sound about their process. Do you feel like he's really started to kind of take command of that role now?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's been in command most of this offseason so far. I think the thing to realize about that interview and everything that's going to happen for now is now the draft is over. Even free agency. I mean, maybe they make one more, maybe they make five more moves, but maybe they make one more what we would consider a big move. But for the most part, the work is done now. They've done what they can, and he can be a little more open and a little more honest. And he's still not going to say anything negative about any of his guys or any of his guys that they've let go. But he definitely is going to be more comfortable now this summer as he focuses on the guys that they've brought in and the job of developing them and determining where they still need to get more help. Everybody knows they need to still find edge rushers. I think what we haven't talked enough about, what nobody's talked enough about, is that there were edge rushers on the roster last year. They just didn't sack the quarterback all that often. Their main concern now is how much better can they make them? How much better will all these new defensive tackles who look to be, potentially pretty good defensive tackles, how much better will they make the edge rushers they already have? That's all a part of the equation now. And I think that's where his focus is now, as opposed to finding new bodies and not giving away anything that might, create a problem for them getting any of the new bodies they want.
If you're joining us live this morning on YouTube or Facebook, you can drop a comment in there. We do take questions when we get a chance. Thank you, everyone who's joining us live. You can also find all of our content at shawlocal.com. Hub and Sean right in there all week long, all off season. We do not stop just because the Bears are off. We got plenty of stuff to talk about with you guys. If you don't listen to this live, you can get this on any of your podcast platforms. It is available on all of those. And if you are watching on YouTube, do us a favor. Hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, tell a friend, leave a comment, anything you can do to help people find the channel, help us grow. It helps us out a ton. It's not just one click of the button. That's all we're asking for. So do us a favor. Now, getting back into the conversation that Ryan Poles had with Dan Bernstein and Lawrence Holmes over on 670, he did, talk about that defensive line quite a bit, Sean. And there's the
Guys, not that anybody really cares, but we have several birds planted a nest in our backyard, or actually in our where the dog is right now. I have 4 babies who were just born the other day, and they're driving the dogs a little nuts, driving me a little nuts too, as a matter of fact. But we got to take care of the babies, so I'm sorry about that. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, so Ryan Poles was talking with Dan Bernstein and Lawrence Holmes, and they asked him about Jalen Carter, and he gave a response that didn't surprise me at all, Sean, which was essentially that Jalen Carter was just not on their boards. He didn't address the off-field issues with Jalen Carter directly, but he talked about the importance of culture and what a locker room can handle at certain times. And I thought that was really revealing.
Yeah, you know what? I typed up his exact quote here because I thought that was super interesting. And yeah, he didn't, flat out say that Jalen Carter wouldn't fit what we're doing, but he kind of did. He said, quote, "We know where our roster is right now and what it can handle, what it can't handle. I think that's part of being intelligent in this space, is knowing the locker room and where it's at. I'm happy with the decision we made." He went on then to say that, sort of what a lot of us in the media have echoed in the week since the draft, that Jalen Carter landed at a really good spot for him. There's lots of veterans on that roster, on that defensive line. And look, the Bears just weren't happy with, the situation that Jalen would have been in here in Chicago. He would have been expected to be, a difference maker from day one, starting on that defensive line. And he doesn't necessarily have to be that in Philadelphia, at least not right away. And so, I'm still okay with the Bears passing on Jalen Carter. I felt like that was the right move. I was saying that all before the draft, that I would not take him, given your situation and how important this draft is for you. And so I get where Ryan Poles is coming from.
Guys, I know I said at least once, I know I said it several times on this podcast over the last couple of months as we've talked about this. What bothered me about Jalen Carter was not the car accident. It was not the tragic death of those 2 young men, one of his teammates, one of the guys he worked with. It was the way he behaved afterwards. It was the way he handled it. Those are the things that concerned me. And I think it's pretty obvious now that those are the things that concern Ryan Poles. Those are the things that concerned a number of teams. And it doesn't make him a bad guy. We got to be careful with this young man. He's 21, 22 years old. Hopefully he's going to grow into a great football player and a fine human being. But it was the way he behaved afterwards that said to me, he may not be ready for this yet. And with our number 1 pick in the most important draft we've had in the last 10, 15 years, we can't take a chance on that. And that's why it really makes perfect sense. And I think Poles did the right thing.
And I can't say that I've gone around to other media markets and heard how other GMs talked about that Jalen Carter pick, but I was impressed with the level of transparency that Ryan gave in that answer, Hub.
Yeah, I mean, I've only gotten a couple of really brief one-on-ones with him yet, and of course missed a good part of last season with what was going on with me. But I'm impressed with, let me say, young Ryan Poles a lot, because he's certainly not acting like he's not ready, like he's too young. He has a very clear plan. He has 10 years of history with the Chiefs, and what he learned there, and that's a pretty good place to learn. And I think that's what he's trying to build here. And I think he is staying true to his beliefs, and in that job, which is only going to last 3-4 years. If he doesn't start to win soon, that's what you got to do. That's the best chance he's got. And I think that's pretty clearly the way he handled the Jalen Carter decision.
Ryan Poles was asked about edge rusher and needing to, or the outside, perception at least, that they need to improve that position. Ryan Poles did talk about that. They are still looking at free agency and trades, not specifically the edge rusher position. I don't think he was referring to, but the Bears are still going to be looking at that market. And I want to start with this because I threw up a comment earlier about Jalen Carter from Mike B, a good friend of mine. And he had started, and I see now Jeff Dieter asking here. So what would be fair compensation for either Chase Young or Carl Lawson, in your opinion? And I want to start with the Chase Young stuff because Mike B was texting me this, and they need to go out and get Chase Young. And I started looking around and I could not find like any source that said like Washington was interested in moving Chase Young. I just see a lot of speculation because they declined his 5th-year option. Hub, I mean, is there any smoke, or is this just fans, dreaming?
Well, I think we're all reading a lot of the same stories and a lot of the same stuff that's being reported. I read a couple of reports, that because Young is he's not young, but he's younger, because he's what the Bears need. You're going to hear a lot of people speculate about, how this could happen. But when the question is what would be fair compensation, I look at what they just got for what they traded, and here, a 2nd-round draft choice, would it do it? I don't know. Like you said, we don't even know that he's on the market. But people can, wish for this. People can think about it. He's obviously what they need in a very good football player. But if he was being traded, because he still has a year left with them, I would think it would cost more, than that 2nd-round pick. Why do it? You've got control of the guy for a year. Who knows what's going to happen this year? So my guess is, people can assume that the Bears, one of their 2nd-round picks in 24 is still going to be very high in the 2nd round. So, maybe that would do it if they were interested in dealing them. But we're just guessing at this point. How desperate are you? How bad do you need them? I think it's more likely, you look at what Philadelphia does. They make deals every day because they feel like they're, a couple moves away from winning another Super Bowl. A team like that is going to pay a little bit more. But when you're rebuilding like the Bears, and you're talking about committing for the next 3 or 4 years to a deal that is going to have to cost you, $80 to $100 million, I don't know how much you give up for that. I don't think I would give up a lot right now. I would just continue the rebuild with the way they're approaching it.
Ryan Voss commenting, the Bears trading for Chase Young would not be consistent with Poles' brief history of being very injury risk averse and valuing future draft capital very highly. Sean, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, I do agree that it would be a little bit out of character for where this roster is now. I mean, you're still not ready. You're still not ready to contend for a Super Bowl yet. I know they've made some nice moves, and you're optimistic about where the things are heading. But that seems like the type of move you would make if you feel like bringing in a Chase Young is going to get you to that next level. And yeah, the injury concern is there with him. He's missed time with injuries. I do think the sort of wild card in all this is specifically with Young is the Commanders' situation as far as this deal is reportedly close to being done for the team being sold. How does that affect the GM and all the people there at the organization? If they do finish this off in the next couple of weeks here, everything could change for them.
Let me just agree with you, Sean, by disagreeing ever so slightly. I don't think it's about a Super Bowl. I mean, what about getting to 500? What about being a playoff team? Are you going to overpay to do that? No, you're going to continue to rebuild, and you're at least a year. Well, at least a year. You're at least 2 years away, and probably 3 years away from even thinking about a Super Bowl. And by then, Chase Young is going to be 3 years older. He's going to be different. It's not the kind of move consistent, as you said, consistent with what Ryan Poles is doing here. And it just doesn't make much sense right now. What you're looking to do right now is find the next great young edge rusher who everybody else missed on, or at least nobody is taken yet. That's the guy you want, the guy who isn't there yet, who can be Chase Young in another, 2 years or 3 years and still only be 25 or 26 years old.
I would have no problem with Hub. I believe you mentioned a second round pick, right? For Chase Young, if I was confident Chase Young could return, if I was Ryan Poles and I'm going, okay, I'm confident he can return to at least close to what we thought before this injury. I mean, he played 9 games in 2021, only played 3 games last year, and yeah, you're going to have to pay him. He was he was the defensive rookie player of the year. The kid was a tremendous prospect. It's such a big wild card. It seems like it's very high risk when they're in a position that they don't need to take that risk right now.
Guys, I don't think there's any negative in this conversation about Chase Young. I think what the listeners and Bears fans have to understand is it's about what makes the Bears rebuild better. Not what makes their pass rush better this year. It's a must. They got to get better there. But how do you want to approach that? You want to approach that exactly the way that Ryan Poles has done it so far. You want to be signing 24, 25, 26-year-old free agents whose best football may still be in front of them. You don't want you don't want to overpay for the guy who's already there in the hopes that he's still there in 2 or 3 years. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I cut you off. I was just going to say, what team would extend a 5th-year option for a guy who has played in 12 games over the last 2 years and has a sack and a half? I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're giving up on him, but he's got to prove it on the field and prove that he can stay healthy and get to the quarterback. And so this is going to be a big year for him. Even though they declined that 5th-year option, I don't think that means that they're done with him.
Our digital editor doing my work for me here this morning, and letting everyone know that we turned on super chat and super stickers in the YouTube chat. You can access those at the bottom of the chat. Let's see, guys. There was a notable trade. I think it was over the weekend with Minnesota, or maybe it was Friday, but recently with Minnesota shipping Zadarius Smith to Cleveland. And Sean, I frankly, I understand why Minnesota did it. They pretty much have to with the cap situation that they're in. But one, I really felt they needed that pass rush. But 2, they just didn't get a whole lot for him, I didn't feel like, from Cleveland.
No, and I know they're coming off a good season, the Vikings, but I don't know. You just look at I just look at what they've done, and I have a hard time seeing where they got better this offseason. It feels like they're kind of trying to run it back with this same group. And I didn't necessarily love the return either. That was a big deal when they got him, and he seemed to be a good fit there. But things clearly didn't really work out or weren't working out long term. And they come in here with the.
I was going to say, I was just going to add to that quickly. You had you had Zadarius Smith, you had Daniel Hunter, and then they went out and signed Marcus Davenport this offseason as well. I think it was only a 1-year deal. I could be wrong on that. But yeah, it just
you trade them for a fourth and a 5th round pick. I mean, if you're the Vikings, you're trying to win now. So I feel like you got Kirk Cousins on your last year. I don't love the move, to be honest, to wrap it up.
Guys, I think at the end of the day, everybody needs to remember trades in the NFL are very different from any other sport. Yeah. One of the things that we know pretty close to a fact is they got the most anybody was offering. They didn't take less because they wanted to help somebody else. That was apparently his value on the market, number one. Number 2. And then secondly, you get them out of the division so you don't have to play them twice a year. Other than that, trades in the NFL, you just don't get as rich or at least get as excited about them as you do in other sports, unless you make a huge deal for a quarterback or something. And then if, the fans think it's the right quarterback, they don't care what you paid for him.
Or if you trade the number 1 pick.
Ryan checking in once again with, I would like to see the Bears sign a vet edge rusher to a 1-year deal. They have the cap space, and it is worth it to see just how far this team can go this year. Yeah, we've discussed that a little bit before, but since we just were talking about trades, let's hit on it one more time. I mean, the guy we mentioned last week that still seems like the best fit is Yannick Ngakoue. I haven't seen any movement on that market, but it's got to come at some point, right? After Zadarius Smith gets traded, I thought maybe that might knock it loose this week.
And I realize what our partner here is talking about, but again, it's the same story. The reason that all these 30-year-old edge rushers are on the market is they don't want 1-year deals. I mean, that may happen eventually. That'll probably happen in August, but I mean, that's just not what the market is right now. That's why these guys are still available. They won't take 1-year deals, or unless you want to pay some ridiculous amount for a year.
Yeah, and this is that time of year where teams don't really have to be in a hurry. There's no rush to sign these guys, especially when you're talking about veterans. You don't really need them in here for OTAs. It'd be nice, sure, but it's not necessary. I think, a lot of these teams are going to look at what they have and see, how some of these, you throw these rookies in now with your veterans for OTAs, you get a better sense of what everything's looking like on your roster. And yeah, you can wait it out until August or late July, right before training camp starts, and probably get some of these guys on relatively favorable deals.
Don't need anyone. We building through the draft. Dominique Robinson from T3P podcast. Yeah, what do you guys expect from both Dominique Robinson and Travis Gibson, who there were some high hopes for going into last year? Really underwhelmed. Those are two young guys that still do provide some intrigue. Hub.
Well, and I think that's a great point. Is that just because they were 3-14 last year? I mean, we've talked, I think, a little bit about how easily that could have been 7-10, or even 8-9. When you look at 4 or 5 of those games that they didn't manage to win, and that means that there obviously was some young talent on the football team in the process of developing, doing good things and making mistakes, and I think that is a big part of what probably not only Ryan Poles, maybe even more importantly Matt Eberflus are focused on right now, is how much better are last year's youngsters going to get, because most of them are going to get a little better, maybe a lot better, and you'll have a better sense at the end of this season if you've gone 7 and 8 or whatever you want to be, with what you really need to get to where you want to go, which is contending for the playoffs and eventually for a Super Bowl. All we can do right now is, really focus during training camp and during the preseason games, the first few weeks of the season, and then we'll have a better sense about some of these kids. I think, one area where I thought they were young, improving, and developing specifically was in the secondary. And the fact that they added a couple more promising cornerbacks, I think that by the middle of the season, the Bears secondary could be pretty impressive this year, and that'll be nice for Matt Eberflus's defense. They've clearly upgraded the interior of the defensive line, and so now you look at the defense as a group, and then the linebackers. I mean, there's a chance that the Bears could go from one of the weakest defenses in the league to a defense that concerns their opponents. And this year, that's not going to be the difference between becoming a playoff team or going to the Super Bowl, because you still got a lot of work to do on offense too. But I think that's probably the plan right now on defense, is not only to be better because of the guys you've added, but because of some of those young players. Look at Jack Sanborn, where he was going, and then he disappeared. Well, he got hurt. How much better is he going to be? So yeah, I think focusing on some of your young players who showed some symptoms last year, and now maybe as veterans understand how to use them and produce them more regularly, that's where you get better too.
Yeah, look, we talk about with quarterbacks a lot, in the general conversation, we talk about that leap from year 1 to year 2, but that, while that's true for quarterbacks, that's really true for all these positions. And I think Dominique Robinson, especially, who the questioner brought up specifically, that's a guy who has the potential to make a big leap because he's so new at that position, because he maybe needs to spend a little bit more time working on the technique and in the weight room to get to where he wants to be as a pass rusher. this is going to be a big year for him. If Dominique Robinson's going to be a thing as an edge rusher, we're probably going to see flashes of that this season. And if that doesn't happen, then I would be concerned that that's maybe not going to work out. But that's a good point, Hub. With all these rookies, Jack Sanborn was a rookie last year. He's going to take a step forward, you would hope. And even Kyler Gordon and Jaquan Brisker, two guys we were really excited about last season. Those guys still have room to improve and can still get better. And I think you can be excited about where all these second year players are going. And you're going to have to get better at the pass rush. Yes, Travis Gibson was another guy who's been around a couple of years and had a disappointing season. I wouldn't underestimate, how much switching the defense affected that for him, and also just losing Robert Quinn on that other side. There was really nobody on that other side who scared the offensive line.
Sean, it's funny because you just mentioned two things that I was thinking about mentioning. People ask about trading for an edge rusher and what might the price be or what's the value. Well, what'd you get for Jaquan Brisker? You got a second round pick, a middle of the second round pick. And then, you mentioned the defense. I'm confusing Jaquan Brisker now with the player who I was thinking of. But Brisker's the guy I was thinking about because not only did he show some really interesting flashes this past season, I think we may see a Pro Bowl or two from that young man before he's through, or maybe even more. I'm not sure yet if it's going to be at cornerback or safety, but I mean, what some of these players develop and what he was drafted to be, your first pick in the draft. I mean, these guys are going to get better too, and that's a huge part of this rebuild and the development.
All right, let's go ahead and pivot over. Hub, you had talked earlier about the Bears finishing 3-14 last year, and you are not wrong by saying that they could have won 7 or 8 games. We haven't had a chance to talk since the schedule came out last week. Sean, looking through the schedule, what were the standout things to you?
The standout things to me, I mean, it's not a particularly tough schedule. When you finish last in the division, you draw some of those other teams that finished last. So there's a lot of winnable games. I think the thing with this, we talk about every year how the NFL has such great parity, but I see a lot of toss-ups on this schedule. And if Justin Fields takes those steps that people think that he can take, and they start winning some of these close games, I don't see why they couldn't finish anywhere from 7 to 10 wins.
How about you?
This is where I just try and be realistic. We read a lot of the stuff that other people do just to know what people are thinking, and some of it because we respect their opinion, some of them we don't think all that highly of. But I've read 2 different reports and I don't even remember which other papers or radio stations or whatever they were coming from, but when they said that the best quarterback in the NFC was Justin Fields, I just stopped reading because I thought, well, this isn't worth reading. Now maybe these were predictions that for this year the most
in the NFC or the NFC North.
In the NFC, 2 different articles. Best development in the NFC this year, and maybe. But why? What is that based on? Where does that come from? Then I was reading some of the betting odds, and I don't know how you could make bets on this, but it was one of the big betting companies was predicting records for each team this year after seeing their schedule, and the prediction on the Bears was 8-9. And the first thing I said to myself is, what's that based on? Where does that come from? I mean, is it because of these other teams who all are going to change this year? We just don't know. What we do know is that there was at least, I keep saying 4 games. I don't remember exactly which 4 games, but at the time I remember feeling like with 1 or 2 plays, maybe you win those instead of you lose those. And so that's how close you were to being better last year. But looking at this year's schedule, other than playing the defending champs, and I don't think you're going to predict a win right now in that one. What about the teams that they're trying to beat? How much better are they? I know it's fun, and like everybody else, when we get to late August and the season is starting, I'll make a prediction like everybody else. But right now, we're just guessing at stuff that we don't have facts on, and so I just don't know what to make of it. I do feel like we know how much better the Bears can be in certain position groups and with individuals at certain positions based on what we've seen of them so far or what we've studied of them as far as the rookies. But how many wins or losses that projects to? There's two things. Number one, it's determined by the entire roster, not just the quarterback. But the second thing is how much better is Justin Fields going to be? And hopefully he's going to be a lot better. But until we see it, I don't know how you predict that.
I remember the over-under for Bears wins last year opened in Vegas at 7.5 wins. And I just remember thinking that was hilariously too high for that team. And sure enough, they got hammered down all the way down to 5.5 or 5.5, which is a fairly significant drop, two whole games. It opened again this year at 7.5 wins for the Bears. And Sean, I actually felt that was directly on where it should be.
Yeah, I did too. I mean, I think that's a good floor. You're looking at over under 7.5. I mean, I feel like this is a team that should be in games, and you look at the schedule, and like you're saying, Hub, I totally agree with you in the sense that we can't really predict what's going to happen. We're going to have different opinions on all these teams once we get 3, 4, or 5 weeks into the season, and what might look like an easy schedule now certainly isn't going to necessarily remain that as we see what some of these teams actually look like. But yeah, I think 7.5 is a good starting point for the Bears, at least if you're Vegas. I don't know. I'm not much of a sports bettor, so I'm no expert in that area. But I've been saying for these past couple of weeks, I feel like 7 to 10 wins is what you should be hoping for if you're a Bears fan. That puts you in the playoff hunt and late in the season. Right around 500. That's all it's going to take in this NFC to get that last playoff spot is maybe a 9-8 record. There's no reason the Bears couldn't be in contention for that. But we have so much to learn about this team as far as how these pieces are all going to fit together. Going back to what we were talking about earlier, are they going to bring in another edge rusher? Is this what they got? Because that's going to make a big difference for that defense. You can add all the linebackers you want, but if you can't get any pressure up front, it's going to be hard on those guys.
Guys, it's real simple for me. I have absolutely nothing against betting. I understand that a lot of people enjoy it. I don't bet at all. Not much of a better. Literally, I don't bet because I hate the losing so much more than I enjoy the winning. It's just that plain. But I gotta say right now, first of all, 7.5 is meaningless because you can't win half a game. So what you're saying is, can the Bears win 8 games?
Yeah, for betting purposes. Yeah.
No, I'm just making the point. What you're really saying is, are the Bears going to win 8 games?
Yeah.
I'm not betting 10 cents on that because I don't want to lose 10 cents, and I'm not saying they won't win 8 games, but again, why would I risk my money on that? It doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, I would understand if somebody took the under, if somebody bet under that, because at least you can say, well, they only won 3 last year. This makes no sense. But I don't know how anybody can bet that they're going to win 8 games based on what we know so far.
Well, what I just heard there is you lean the under is what I hear there. You wouldn't bet 10 cents on the over, but if you had to take one way, you would go with the under is what I heard there.
Well, no, what you were supposed to hear was I wouldn't bet either way because I just don't take the chance. But I mean, what I'm asking is which one makes more sense. I mean, I don't know what people are risking their money on, what they're basing it on by saying the Bears are going to win 8 games. I sure hope the Bears do. I hope they win 11, but I'm just trying to be an analyst here and say, where's the information? Where are the facts? What am I basing this on?
The question I had more was, did you feel 7.5 was fair? I think you're saying it should probably be a little lower though. You're saying maybe it should be 6.5.
Well, they only won 3 last year. Are they more than twice as good already, without even going to practice yet, let alone playing a game? And you just made the point, I think, when you said last year that it opened at 7.5 or 8 and went to 5.5 because everybody reacted the same way. How are they going to do that? But I don't know. Again, I'm the wrong person to be talking about this because I don't bet. And so I don't know what people's theory is when they make their bets. I mean, some people just hoping to get lucky, I guess. I assume most people, apparently that's what they're doing. But I do know, having been in this business as long as I have and having known a lot of people who've both done very well and gotten hurt badly by betting, that it's a bad idea. Unless you're willing to lose money that you don't need. And unfortunately, I haven't been successful enough to have money that I don't need. So that's why I don't bet.
Sorry guys, I lost my train of thought there at the end. That's why it was more, again, it was less about the betting that I cared about and more about, last year it was 7.5. I laughed at. This year I saw 7.5 and I felt it was about right. It's more about speaking to the quality of the roster is what I'm saying. I feel much more confident about where this team is, and that's not surprising, right? But like, you look at the plan they put in place here this offseason, and I do like it. What's the best way to phrase this? I guess when we see the totality of where Ryan Poles has put this organization now, with pretty much 2 off seasons complete, I feel pretty confident that this is the correct arc to see a team be able to make that leap from 3 wins to 8 wins to potentially 9 or 10 wins, is what I guess I'm trying to say.
It's real easy for me. I mean, if the bet was 4 instead of 3, I'd say, yeah, go ahead, make that bet. I have no doubt that they're better. Yeah, in relation to what you just said, I agree. I think they've improved their roster. I think Justin Fields is going to get better. I think they're going to win more than 3 games. Are they going to win more than twice as many? I don't know. I don't know. And I don't want to risk my money on that.
Look, let's go back to an example from last year. The Jaguars went 3-14 in 2021. Jumped to 9-8 with that playoff appearance last season. Why couldn't that be the Bears? Or I guess let me phrase that in a better way. If the Bears are going to do that, it's because what? Fill in the blank. What do you guys think? If the Bears are going to make a leap like that, what needs to happen?
Justin Fields needs to be able to make plays in the fourth quarter that turn losses into wins.
That's number one. I think that's an obvious one. Mike Gibson had checked in a little bit ago. I'll throw that up there now. 2 big improvements I want to see is stopping the run on defense and a much improved pass game. If we do those 2 things, I would judge this as a successful season, regardless of record. And yeah, for all the talk about needing to get the sack numbers up, there were a lot of times last year, particularly after the Roquan Smith trade, where the Bears were frankly bludgeoned by opposing run game, Sean.
Yeah, and I think that's why you saw them put such an emphasis on those defensive tackles in the draft. I mean, they got to get better on the interior, not just at edge rusher, but all across the board on that defensive line. That's why they brought in Javon Dexter. That's why they brought in Zach Pickens. Those guys might not necessarily start right away, but they're going to be in the rotation right away. You bring back Justin Jones, you get a guy, Andrew Billings, in free agency, and add DeMarcus Walker, who could be an edge rusher, has some experience playing defensive tackle as well, could probably go both, mix and match wherever they need him.
And you got significantly stronger at the linebacker position as well.
And you add a couple of really good linebackers, and yeah, that was clearly a focus. They need to get better in that area. And, they were one of the worst defenses in the league last year, all across the board, against the run, against the pass. But certainly you don't want to let teams run like that against you. And, I think the Bears are taking steps that you can be excited about, and you can feel optimistic that they're going to fix some of those issues this season.
Yeah, Hub, how much, going back when you looked at the tape for this past season, where was your level of concern about the Bears' run defense, like going into this offseason, I guess I would say?
Well, by the end of the season, arguably the best player on your defense was an undrafted rookie free agent linebacker.
Yeah.
And so, there's nothing really surprising about that. I don't think. And so you get better across the board. You got even at safety. I mean, defensive backs who will hit and tackle. I think we get so locked into things that sometimes we don't look at the bigger picture. One of the ways that I'm convinced the Bears believe that they have significantly improved their pass rush this year without getting an edge rusher is in signing DeMarcus Walker and Tremaine Edmonds. I think each of them had 7 sacks last year, even though neither one's an edge rusher. And they will also make the edge rushers that they have better. And then when you talk about fixing the running game, there's no question that, well, I won't say one side of the defense is more important than the other, but if you have a really solid run defense and you want to force a team to beat you with the pass, that's a lot harder to do for the team that's trying to beat you than if they know they can run the football for 3, 4, 5 yards for first down and they don't have to complete a 10-yard pass. And so there's no question about the importance and the significance of it. And I don't think anybody would dispute that they probably have dramatically improved their run defense with what they've done this offseason.
All right, guys. Well, we got to get going here. But Sean, as we go into these OTAs over the next few weeks, what are some things that you're looking to learn or looking forward to?
Yeah. We'll have an article here soon with a number of things to watch during OTAs and throughout the spring. But the couple of things that really stand out in my mind are, number one, I'm just excited to see Justin Fields and DJ Moore on the field together and to see what that connection is looking like. To see how this receiving group fits together, these 3 guys, Moore and Mooney and Claypool. It's only going to be the beginning. It's a long process. They got the whole spring, whole summer to go through. But, I want to see them working out there and working through some things and throwing the football around. And I want to see what that looks like because this is going to kind of be our first taste of that for the offense. And if Justin Fields is going to take this next step, those guys have to be really good. He needs them as much as they need him. So that's number one. And the other one, kind of along the lines of what we were just saying, is I want to see how those 2 new rookie defensive tackles that they drafted really high, how do those guys fit into this rotation? How much playing time are we going to see from them right away? And how do they juggle all these different guys on that defensive line? They have options. They have different ways they could go. It sounds like Justin Jones is going to at least start the offseason as the starting 3 technique, but maybe that other spot's up for grabs. And, it really doesn't matter who starts because a lot of these guys are going to see snaps. But I want to see them, even though we don't really get a good sense of what's really going on when they're not in pads, we'll have some idea of sort of who is looking like the starters and who's not.
Guys, the guy I'm most curious about, to be honest with you right now, is Zach Pickens. And the reason is, you make what is a pretty big move for Javon Dexter, your first pick in the 2nd round. And then with the number 1 pick in the 3rd round, you go right back to the same position, and neither one of these guys were amongst the top 5 or 6 at their position, but they were all, ranked as day 2 draft choices. I think, with most of the reports that I did and that I saw that other people did, I think we had them a little later on day 2. But I think the fact that, they clearly prioritized Dexter by taking him where they did, because the very next pick, as I've pointed out a few times, was my edge rusher for USC after they let him pass. But then to come back, 7 picks later, or however many it was, 11 picks later, and take another player at the same position, they're obviously, to me, pretty high on Zach Pickens. And so I really am anxious to see, how he plays once he gets in against other NFL players.
All right. That sounds like a couple good reasons, or plenty of good reasons, to stick right at shawlocal.com. Sean and Hub will have coverage. Well, Sean will actually not have coverage, but we will have a fill-in for Sean out at Hallis Hall. Sean's taking some time off, well-deserved time off. But Hub and I will be back with you. And one more time, if you're watching live on YouTube or you're watching this even later, do us a favor, subscribe to the channel, give us a thumbs up, leave a comment. We really do appreciate it. Thank you, everyone who joined us live this morning. It's great having everyone here and talking football with you. Enjoy the beautiful weather. Grab a beer this afternoon, this evening, watch the NBA lottery, see if the Bulls get that number 1 pick. Be a nice little coup for the Bulls to be able to pull that one out of the hat, guys. So thank you once again, everyone joining us live this morning. We'll talk to you later.